Hi everyone, I'm Rhonda and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are brand new. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of February. So February was not the best reading month for me. I did not read as many books as I typically do. I only read 8 books, which is still good. I think most people would say 8 books is a lot, but for me, I typically read a lot more. On top of that, the quality of the books, while I enjoyed the majority of the books I read, they were entertaining, I just did not love them. I think the majority of them were 3-star reads, which is still a good rating. That is, I enjoyed it rating, but they just didn't go beyond that really. So the quality and the quantity of the books that I read were not the best. And then again, I only read 8 books. Typically I read much more than that. And the reason behind that is because I was incredibly busy in February. February is cookie season for my daughters. Both of my daughters are in Girl Scouts, and cookie season started on Super Bowl weekend. On top of that, I am the cookie mom for my oldest daughter's troop, which means I was responsible for doing extra duties on top of just helping my girls sell cookies door to door. And then adding on to the busyness of February, on Valentine's Day, my family adopted a new puppy. We actually adopted him from a rescue nonprofit called Jenny's Rescue Ranch. And if anyone's had a puppy before, he is a handful, and so I'm constantly having to stop what I'm doing and going to see what he's getting into. We're trying to potty train him, and he is definitely a handful, but we love him. He is 5 months old. We don't know exactly what he is, but he is a bull terrier mix, possibly. We think he has some Australian Shepherd in him. We think he has some pit bull in him. He's got a little bit of everything. He's definitely a cutie, and we named him Bowie. He has 2 different colored eyes, and then on top of that, on his chest, he has some white on his chest, and it looks like it's in the shape of a star. So in honor of David Bowie and Daniel Bowie, we named him Bowie. We thought it was so fitting. So a little bit later, probably at the end of the video, I will show you Bowie and how cute he is, but we love him so much and we're so glad we got him. So short story long is I had a busy February. A lot of stuff was going on. I was getting pulled in different directions, but I did manage to read 8 books, and I'm very proud of that. I think 8 books is still a lot of books for most people. My average Goodreads rating was 3.25, which it's a little on the low side, but again, a lot of the books I read were 3-star reads, so there you go. And then in terms of genres, I read 4 contemporary romances, 1 YA fantasy romance, 1 thriller. I also read 1 cozy mystery rom-com, and then I also read 1 historical fiction / a little bit of fantasy because there was some time travel. So those are all the genres I read. Now, in terms of my February TBR, I did a really bad job. I only read 2 books from the books that I picked for February, which is pretty bad. I try to do a little bit better than that. I usually maybe read half, if not more than half of those books. So it just kind of shows that I was really mood reading and trying to get myself to read more despite being busy. All right, let's go ahead and talk about all the books that I read in the month of February. And just like in previous wrap-up videos, I'm going over them in the order that I read them, starting with the very first book that I read in February, and that is Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. Now, this book is Sarah Adams' newest release in her small town contemporary romance series called the Rome, Kentucky series, or the When in Rome series. This is about Emily and Jack. Emily and Jack are kind of feuding second-grade teachers or rivals at this school. Jack actually has recently moved back to town after he moved away to get married. Unfortunately, that wedding was canceled and he moved back, and he actually moved in next door to Emily. Emily and Jack have a little bit of a history. They went to college together and they had an interesting meet cute, and Emily just doesn't want to have anything to do with Jack. She doesn't like him and she pushes him away, and she kind of competes with him a little bit. So this is definitely a rivals to lovers, a hate to love, or enemies to lovers trope. And I really, truly enjoyed this book. Here, they also have a little bit of a problem to solve, and they have to work together to solve that problem. That's really all I'm going to say. But this was such a delightful, wonderful first book of February, a wonderful Valentine's book to get into. I loved the banter and the bickering. I love their chemistry. I love these little situations they found themselves in. It was just a cute, cute book. So I gave this one 4 stars. I really, truly enjoyed it. The only thing I did not like about it was around the last 20% of the book, it started to get a little boring and I started to lose a little bit interest, and I felt like it was running just a little bit too long. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a great time reading it, and I gave it 4 stars. The second book that I read in the month of February is Love Story by Lindsay Kelk. This is another small town contemporary romance. So in this book, we are following Sophie and Joe, and Sophie is actually a school teacher. However, she is also harboring a little bit of a secret, and that is the fact that she is Estee Cox, who is this mysterious romance author who just wrote a sensational spicy romance. It is a bestseller, and people want to know who is Estee Cox, and they are eagerly anticipating her new release. Well, unfortunately, Sophie ends up leaving her bag that has her laptop and a hard copy of her new release on a train on her way home for a family event. But she ends up having to work with Joe, who is the creative director at the publishing house that publishes her book, as well as I think his family is friends with her family, and they are both going to the same small town for some family event. I don't remember, but they're having to work together to help find this manuscript and kind of try to help her keep her secret. So that's what this is about. They don't get along. That's really all I remember. I don't remember a ton about this book. I did remember that I did not enjoy it. I did love the plot idea. I thought it was very interesting, which is why I bought this to begin with. But overall, I just kind of got bored with it. I didn't feel like it was executed very well. I did not feel the chemistry between Joe and Sophie. I just didn't care. And then also, I was about halfway through this book when I started skimming through it. I wanted to finish it because I wanted to know what happened, but I didn't want to invest myself in the story because I was not having a good time with it. I probably should have DNF'd it, but it wasn't for me. I gave this one 2 stars. The next book I read was Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This is the second book in the Rose Hill series, which is a small town contemporary romance series featuring single dads. Here we are following Weston, who is the brother of the FMC from the first book in the series called Wild Love. We are also following Skylar, who is a very famous, I believe she's a country singer, and she has come to town to work with Ford Grant, who was featured in the first book because he's a very famous music producer, and she's come to work with him on a new album. Now, Skylar is going through something really traumatic. She's had a wonderful career, but throughout her career, she has been taken advantage of by her family and her friends, and she really has come to Rose Hill not only to work on her new album, but to also escape the pressures of being this famous person and coming to terms with the fact that everyone is just taking from her. So that's what this one is about, and I really loved Sky's heartbreaking background story and what she had to go through in the entertainment industry. I think Elsie Silver did a wonderful job of just opening our eyes to the financial abuse and the mental abuse and the mental toll that the industry takes on young performers and why they are the way they are today. It really made me regret. It made me regret reading all of the Britney Spears gossip pages that I read when I was in my 20s. I could not get enough. When she had her breakdown, when she shaved her head, I was just like, I couldn't get enough reading about Britney Spears and everything she was doing, all the crazy stuff. Now, when it comes to West and Sky, this book is a little bit of a slow burn. Elsie Silver did a great job of really building that incredible tension and that incredible chemistry between the two. I don't know if you can hear the squeaky, but Bowie's over here chewing on his little toy. I'm so sorry. Anyway, they also have a really funny and cute meet cute in this book involving a bear. I laughed my booty off. But again, their tension and their chemistry and their banter and the little things they do for each other and with each other is just truly, truly sweet. And I really, really loved it. Having said that this one was a little bit too long for me. Yes, it is a slow burn. It wasn't too much of a slow burn, but I felt like around the halfway mark, I was ready for things to pick up and start moving. Also, when I was doing my review of the first book in the series, I did mention that I felt like Elsie Silver was holding back a little bit when it came to the spiciness of the bedroom scenes, and I definitely appreciated that. This book, she made up for it. I think this is probably the spiciest book that she's had. I could be wrong, but for me, it was way, 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 way too much to the point where it came across as crude, and it just wasn't for me. I don't like super spicy scenes. However, the love story in here, Sky's backstory was perfection. I really, truly loved it. So that is why I gave it 4 stars. So far, I am truly enjoying this series. I'm loving the single dad tropes in each book. I'm loving the romance in each of the books. they're just still a little too spicy for me. Now, the third book in this series just came out yesterday, and that is called Wild Side. So if you haven't read this series, now's your time. You have 3 books to get to, and then you're caught up. But this was a 4-star read. Really enjoyed it. Now, after reading 3 contemporary romances, I definitely needed a break, so I picked up A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall. This is her new thriller release. So this one is about Theo, and she is seeing this man named Connor Dalton, and he invites her to his family retreat. Connor, by the way, is very wealthy, and he invites her to meet his family at their family compound, so to speak. But before she gets there, she is sent a very cryptic message telling her to stay away from Connor. And then when she gets to, I think it's called Idlewood, which is the name of the family estate of the Dalton family, she meets his family. They're very cold, but she comes across one of the cabins and she finds a picture of herself as a child, but she has no memory of being ever at this place. So that is all you need to know. That is what this one is about. And overall, I thought it was good. I did enjoy it. I gave it 3 stars, but it's not a book that's going to stay with me. Now, this is my first Kate Alice Marshall book. I actually thought that I read something else by her, but I didn't. So I'm glad that I read this one. I think is a good intro to her. But because I haven't read anything by her, I have nothing to compare it with. So while I did enjoy this book, I did give it 3 stars, mainly because I feel like this is going to be something that is forgettable. I feel like it's something I've read before. Now, I did enjoy the writing. I thought the writing was good. I did enjoy a little bit of the everyone in the family has a secret mystique and trying to figure out what everyone's hiding and kind of piecing things together. I enjoyed that this was on the shorter side. However, I feel like I've read this before. There was nothing new that this book brought to me, and for that reason I gave it 3 stars. It was good. I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it if you've maybe read her books before. It just, again, it was predictable, and it's not something that is going to stay with me and that I'm always going to be like, oh, you got to read this book. It was just okay. All right, the next book I read is The Vanishing of Josephine Reynolds by Jennifer Moorman. And this is marketed as a fantasy book, I think because there's time travel. But I would say this is definitely more of, I don't know, it's kind of genre bending. It's kind of a general fiction, maybe women's fiction book. There is fantasy because of the time travel, but it's also kind of a historical fiction. And it kind of reminded me a smidge of The Unmaking of June Farrow, but I feel like I enjoyed The Unmaking of June Farrow much better. So in this book, we are following Josephine Reynolds, who is a widow. Her husband passed away, I believe, 6 months ago or a year ago, and she's still trying to pick up the pieces, but she knows it's time for her to move on with her life. So she ends up selling her home that she shared with her husband, and she buys the home that belonged to her great grandmother. Now, the home is actually in a little bit of a disrepair, and she wants to kind of put it back together in its former glory. And she ends up replacing the more modern front door with the original front door. And once she replaces that front door, she finds herself transported to the 1920s, where she needs to prevent the death of her great grandmother, because if her great grandmother dies during this time, Josephine Reynolds will never be born. So because of that, it reminded me a little bit of Back to the Future. Now, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. Overall, I did enjoy it. I thought it was fine. I liked the historical journey that Josephine's taking in this book. And I also enjoyed the mystery that Josephine is trying to solve, because she's trying to figure out how her grandmother died and who killed her. And I enjoyed the writing. The problems I had with this book was there is a little bit of a romance, and while I thought it was sweet, it felt really instant lovey, because you are following Josephine during a week's time, and she is going from being distraught over the death of her husband, she's still grieving, to being in love with this man that she's just met. And it just felt a little forced. It felt very insta-lovey, and I didn't like that. And then also, I wish that there was more of a historical element to this book. Here, Josephine is really just spending all of her time in this home, hanging out with her great-grandmother, but I wish there was more scenes of Josephine truly experiencing what life was like for women in the 1920s during the Prohibition era. I wish she went there, and she just really just kind of glossed over it, and I feel like it could have been a deeper book. Again, overall, I did enjoy this book. I gave it 3 stars, and I feel like this is a good book for people who are just dipping their toes into time travel books or historical fiction books. I think you might enjoy this book if you haven't read a ton of those. So again, 3 stars for The Vanishing of Josephine Reynolds. The next book I read is Pomona Afton Can Solve a Murder by Bellamy Rose. I got this one off of NetGalley. It is an arc that is coming out, I believe, on March 18th. I'm really not sure what to classify this book as. I think it is definitely a cozy mystery, but it's also a rom-com. It was just a silly, fun book. So here we are following Pomona Afton, who she is an heiress to a chain of hotels. Think Paris Hilton. And one day, the matriarch of this family, her grandmother, is murdered, and Pomona's assets are frozen. She is kicked out of the hotel she's living in, and she has to make it in the world until people find out who killed this grandmother, because the grandmother thinks someone close to her was trying to kill her. So that's what's going on. So think Paris Hilton losing all of her money and having to make it in the real world, and you have this book. Unfortunately, the police officers are not moving quick enough to solve her grandmother's murder, and because she needs that money to live on, she's having a hard time making it in the real world. She decides that she's going to solve the murder herself. Now, she ends up enlisting the help of a man named Gabe, who is the son of her old nanny, who she's kind of stayed in contact with. Because Pomona doesn't have a place to stay, her nanny says, hey, why don't you get with Gabe? He has an extra room. You can live with him while you get on your feet. So that is what this book is about. With this one, I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was just a silly rom-com. It was a goofy, cozy mystery. And I had a good time reading it. It was fine. It's just not something that's going to be memorable. What I didn't love about it was the romance in this book. There is a touch of romance between Gabe and Pomona. And I just really didn't care. I didn't feel like it added anything to the story. I wasn't reading for them. I didn't really feel any chemistry. The romance element just did not resonate with me, but I did enjoy the writing. I thought the writing was fine. I think that this is the author's debut novel, and I would actually read more from her. Again, I give this one 3 stars. I thought it was fine. It wasn't anything that just knocked my socks off. It did remind me a little bit of The Blonde Identity and The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by, who wrote that? Ali Carter. If you read those books, you might enjoy this one. It reminded me a lot of those just because it was just a silly, entertaining read. And that's why I give it 3 stars. Next up is First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. B.K. Borison, in case you don't know, wrote the entire Love Light Farm series. I've only read the first book of that series, and I really enjoyed it. And I was looking forward to this one coming out. This is her newest release, and she is actually starting a new series, and this is the first book in that series. But this is a contemporary romance, and it is about Aiden Valentine and Lucy Stone. Aiden is actually kind of a jaded radio host for a call-in radio show where people can call in and get advice on their relationships. And Lucy Stone is a single mom who just kind of put her life on hold for her daughter and to raise her daughter. And her daughter ends up calling into Aiden Valentine's radio show looking for love for her mom. So it's definitely more of a modern take on Sleepless in Seattle. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I need to fix this. I did enjoy it. There, that's better. I did enjoy this one. I loved the cute modern take on the Sleepless in Seattle movie. I felt like this one read a little too slow. This is definitely more of a cozy, slow burn romance, which I don't have a problem with this, but I feel like around the halfway mark, I started to lose interest and I really wanted the pacing to pick up some. So really that is the problem that I had with this book, was the entire pacing. It was just a little bit too cozy, a little bit too slow. I needed more things to start to happen. Also too, the other thing that really bugged me in this book was Aiden's attitude on dating. He definitely had the I don't want to be with anyone, I don't want to be in a relationship attitude based on things that happened in his past with his family. And I just found that frustrating, especially since that is something that annoyed the heck out of me back when I was dating. And I definitely don't want to read books where the main male character has those same feelings. I can't stand that. So with this one, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I know a lot of people who really enjoyed this one. I think some people even gave it 5 stars. For me, it wasn't there. It was a touch too long. It was a little too slow for me. I needed that pacing to pick up. And again, Aiden's attitude on dating just drove me bananas. It made me frustrated. So those are the reasons why I gave this one 3 stars. The last book that I read in the month of February is Rebel Witch by Kristen Cicerelli. And I actually got the Barnes & Noble special edition, which I think is really pretty. I love the cover art. And then on the actual book, it has this beautiful copper foiling of a moth and some ferns and stuff. But I really, really think this special edition is gorgeous. Anyway, this is the second and final book in the Crimson Moth series. This is a YA fantasy romance series, and it's about a witch and a witch hunter. So in this whole series, you are following Rhonda, who is a witch. However, in this land, if you are found to be a witch, you are executed. So witches are definitely in hiding, but no one knows that Rhonda is a witch because by day, she is just a debutante, a kind of a vapid socialite who goes to these balls and parties, and people just treat her just as this pretty girl who doesn't have a thought in her head. But by night, she is a vigilante. She is called the Crimson Moth. She is the witch who is getting other witches off this island and out of this country and sending them to safety. You're also following Gideon, who is probably the most well-known witch hunter and the most successful, and he is on to Rhonda. He thinks she's harboring a secret, and so he kind of creates this little relationship so that he can figure out what's going on with Rhonda. Who is she? Is she the Crimson Moth? What's going on? So really, that's what this entire series is about. I loved the first book, Heartless Hunter. I gave that one 4 stars, and it left on quite a cliffhanger, and I just could not wait for Rebel Witch to come out, and it was released sometime in February, and I immediately bought it and started reading it, and I finished it, I think, on the last day of February. I really had a good time reading this. It was such a good conclusion to this little duology, and just like Heartless Hunter, I'm giving this one 4 stars too. I loved reading about their character growth because I feel like Rhonda and Gideon really grew, not only as a couple, but individually as well. They grew stronger together and individually. I loved reading. This book was so fast-paced. There was always something happening, and it was truly high stakes. It was heartbreaking. I was crying in parts, but I loved reading about loyalty. That is a common theme. Where does your loyalty lie? What's more important to you? And that was definitely covered in this book, and it was just very well done. I did not get 5-star feelings on this one, but I did have just a great time reading it. I felt like it was a great conclusion to this little duology, and I would absolutely recommend you read it if you haven't already. And so again, I gave this one 4 stars. All right, my friends, earlier in the video, I mentioned I would introduce you guys to Bowie and meet Bowie. He is such a little snuggle bug. He was actually sleeping, so he's got a little bit of tired eyes. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but he has 2 different colored eyes, and we love him so much. He's such a good boy, and he's oh, big yawn. And he's got puppy breath, which is the most wonderful smell in the world. But this is Bowie. Say hi to everyone. But he is our new addition. He has fit in perfectly with our family. He's getting along well with the other dogs, and he wants down. But we love him so much. But that is Bowie. All right, my friends, these are the 8 books that I read in February. If you read any of these books, please let me know in the comments what you thought about them. And also let me know what your most favorite book was for the month of February. For me, it's going to be a toss-up between Beg, Borrow, or Steal and Rebel Witch. I loved both of those books equally. They were so, so good. I highly recommend you read them if you haven't already. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.